domestic product, constant prices, basic prices. 2015, the last year of the government led by the Member of Parliament for Siparia. The GDP at basic prices was $164 billion. In came the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Minister of Finance, with us today. Within the first year, Madam Speaker, GDP dropped by $10 billion to $154.9 billion. 2017, it dropped again to $151.7 billion. 2018, it dropped again to $150 billion. 2019, it dropped again to $148.6 billion. And that, Madam Speaker, had nothing to do with COVID. As a matter of fact, as a matter of record, using the figures that the minister himself provided in the budget, in his budget presentation on the last occasion, Madam Speaker, in every single year since this minister has been Minister of Finance in Trinidad and Tobago, the gross domestic product has dropped in every single year. That is an indictment against the Honourable Minister's performance. That is also proof, Madam Speaker, that the economy collapsed before COVID. The manufacturing sector, which he has boasted about in 2018, that having turned around and is making great progress, that very same manufacturing sector, Madam Speaker, actually fell by $2 billion between 2015 and 2019 under his hand. And I repeat, this had nothing to do with COVID. This is before the advent of COVID, Madam Speaker. COVID just made it worse. So we know that when the Minister of Finance eventually provides the information with regards to the GDP for 2020, it will be substantially worse than it is again today. What that tells me then, Madam Speaker, is that for the entire process from 2015 when he took office to current, Madam Speaker, his contribution, the contribution of this by the Minister of Finance via the GDP would have collapsed every single year under his hand. But let's look at other indicators, Madam Speaker. Central government revenue. From 2010 to 2015, even in the face of falling energy prices and production, Madam Speaker, government revenue increased by 30% under the hand of the Honourable Member for Siparia, and increased by over 30%. Again, just like with GDP, in year one, as soon as the member for Diego Martin Northeast came in, as soon as he occupied office, GDP dropped by revenue dropped. Government revenue dropped by $12 billion. In fact, Madam Speaker, over the entire period of time from 2015 under his hand to 2019, revenue fell by over 41% under his hand. Tax revenue fell by 38%, Madam Speaker. Tax revenue. And that is despite the minister's attempt. You would recall, Madam Speaker, that the Honourable Minister introduced VAT on 7,000 food items in an attempt to widen the tax base. The result was the opposite. Instead of increasing tax take, less tax was received. Capital revenue in the last fiscal year was a mere 14% of what it was when he took office, Madam Speaker. Capital revenue. The current account balance, Madam Speaker, which was minus $50.6 million. And this is noteworthy, Madam Speaker. The current account balance, which was minus $50.6 million in 2015 when he took office, at last count has reached minus $13.5 billion. And this is projected to continue to get worse. Madam Speaker, what about debt? In addition to picking the nation's pockets with regards to the NIF, VAT, the failure to pay VAT and tax refunds owed to persons, the failure to pay government creditors, access to the government Heritage and Stabilization Fund. In addition to accessing funds through all of those mechanisms, Madam Speaker, the government has continued to borrow, and the minister is on record as recent as 2 or 3 days ago, was advising that he will continue to borrow. I have said it before in this House, Madam Speaker, and it bears repeating that there's nothing wrong with borrowing funds. What is absolutely wrong is what he is doing with it. There's no track record, nothing to show for it, Madam Speaker. Worse than that, the net public sector debt in this country is now the highest it has ever been in our history, at $122.2 billion. What is perhaps worse, Madam Speaker, is that our debt to GDP ratio at last record was 82.7%. That was in December last year. Over the last 3 months, Madam Speaker, this would have gotten progressively worse. That figure will probably be closer to 90% now and will get worse going down the road to the end of the year. This government now owes, Madam Speaker, over $133 billion to local and foreign creditors and institutions. That is where we are today under this minister. What is perhaps of greater concern, Madam Speaker, is the growing foreign debt of this minister's borrowing. The growing component, Madam Speaker. We have moved from $2.3 billion, from owing $2.3 billion US dollars in debt under his hand to currently owing $4.7 billion. In 5.5 short years, this minister has increased the amount of foreign borrowing, the amount of foreign debt that this country has without having created new capacity to generate foreign exchange. Madam Speaker, my other colleagues will raise issues and talk about foreign reserves. The fact that when he came in, we had 12 months coverage. Today we have 8 months coverage, and that's been eaten away. My other colleagues will speak about employment and the fact that even today we have no evidence, no true figure for what unemployment is. Earlier today, one of my colleagues raised the issue trying to get some final figures. What we do know, Madam Speaker, is that the member of Superior in October last year provided evidence in this very House to show that over 65,000 jobs had been lost. And that was before COVID. Over 65,000 jobs have been lost under this minister's hand between 2015 and 2019. But how did we get here? It is clear that the economy is in crisis, Madam Speaker. It is clear that the economy is in peril, and it took this minister 5.5 years to actually admit it. When the minister took office, he found an economy that was growing. The statistics I just gave, Madam Speaker, proved that. There was investment. There was new business startups. There was growing employment. There was foreign direct investment. There was confidence in the economy, Madam Speaker. There was activity in every sector, and it was clearly visible. In came the Minister of Finance, and he immediately began disassembling and dismantling the business environment, the economic infrastructure, and the confidence that had taken us so much effort and time and structure and policy and strategy to build. But this was an election campaign that started from day one, Madam Speaker. From the very first day, this was an election campaign. You see, the plan was always to start off by saying things are bad. What we found was very bad. And then say, we have a plan, we're building a plan, we're creating a plan. And then say, well, okay, well, there's some level of stabilization, finally. Stabilization. And then turn around just in time, Madam Speaker, for the election. The titles of the minister's budget carries that plan right through. 2016, restoring confidence and building trust. 2017, shaping a brighter future. 2018, putting the economy on a sustainable path. 2019, turnaround. 2020, stability, strength, and growth. But the facts that I just provided, Madam Speaker, shows that we did not have turnaround, stability, or growth. Far from improving, Madam Speaker, this country has gotten worse. You see, the issue was never about transparency. The issue was never about good governance. The issue was never about accountability. The issue was never about the people. It was always about the public relations, Madam Speaker. The 2021 budget, so we spoke about the 5 budgets and their plan and their structure. The 2021 budget, because they've already gone through the restoring confidence, there's a crisis shaping, putting the sustainable path, turnaround and stability. So they've already gone through those five. Their 5 years have passed. You know what they've just done, Madam Speaker, is revert back to the first one. On their hand, they've gone back to the first one. The minister's last budget was titled, Resetting the Economy for Growth and Innovation. It's the same narrative, the same story. Things are bad again. The only difference, Madam Speaker, is he has already spent $300 billion. $300 billion of our dollars. The only thing that has changed is $300 billion has been spent, and the narrative. We have moved now from the blame Kamala to blame COVID mantra. 5 days ago, Madam Speaker, and I counted the days, 5 days ago I saw an episode of Criminal Minds, in which a man who, there was a gentleman who was busy setting fires so he could run in to out the fires. One of the key analysts in the show described that as hero syndrome. The creation of a problem to run in to solve it, to make it look like you have made some level of achievement. I see a parallel here, Madam Speaker. You see, in the minister's haste to build up the narrative that things were bad so he could build up his own image and make the claims that he has made, which we already proven by the statistics, are not true. In his haste to do that, he created the very problem that he was identifying. From the very first day the minister stepped into office, he ran up and spoke to everybody, started talking about the economy running on fumes. Remember that, Madam Speaker? The economy running on fumes. They had maxed out the overdraft. There was no money to run the country. Like chicken licking, running all over the country, complaining that the country was bankrupt, that the government had no money. That is the message they fed to the business community. That is the message they fed to the international investors. That is the message they sent to the international lending institutions, Madam Speaker. And that was the message that they used to justify not paying government's creditors, forgetting the wage negotiations, to block payments to contractors, to refuse to pay outstanding VAT and tax rebates to businesses and individuals, to starve local government of resources, to close down state enterprises, to restrict access to foreign exchange, and to sell off state assets, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister created the very crisis of confidence under his hand. He created it, that he was complaining about in 2015, when the economy that he met was growing. He created the problem. The difficulty he has now is that he cannot hide it anymore. It is open for everyone with eyes to see. This crisis of confidence was identified by a central bank report just recently published this year, in which economic uncertainty is defined, and in which they described as economic uncertainty as having moved from moderate levels in 2014 to high and elevated levels of economic uncertainty under this minister's hand. This, Madam Speaker, our state of the economy now is a self-inflicted wound. In every budget, this minister will come to the House and make pronouncements of grand plans on things he was going to do. We all remember the famous game changers, 6 game changers of things that would change the future of this country. They have not done any of those, Madam Speaker. Remember the roadmap for recovery, Madam Speaker? Even the roadmap for recovery tells you that they didn't have a plan, because they have now also abandoned that plan, just like they have abandoned a multiplicity of plans that they brought to the Parliament and occupied parliamentary time discussing, but had no intentions of implementing. Madam Speaker, I recall the plywood factory in Library. I recall the dry dock that they were supposed to be building that would create impetus and employment in the Southern Peninsula. And ministers opposite have had multiple occasions in which they have also brought plans, policies, programs, and initiatives that they propose to do. My colleagues will treat with those that they propose to do, but the Minister of Finance did not facilitate. There was no funding for it. Madam Speaker, when the Minister of Finance withholds VAT and taxes from businesses, he puts them at a significant disadvantage. He puts them in danger because it affects their cash flow. That is common business sense. The minister knows that. So when you don't pay these individuals, they run themselves into debt. And when the minister eventually comes and says, here, hold a bond, Madam Speaker, here, hold a bond. And the first payment for several years down the road, what that is in effect doing, Madam Speaker, is the government is forcefully borrowing from these very same people, putting them at loss. Is it any wonder then, Madam Speaker, that business confidence has collapsed? When the minister has watered down the procurement legislation so that when he has watered down the procurement legislation, when he has failed to fully implement the legislation as it exists now, when he has failed to bring the regulations to implement those regulations, Madam Speaker, he leaves open the perception of corruption. This is therefore no surprise to anyone that thanks to the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the Minister of Finance, it's no surprise that Trinidad and Tobago's ranking in the Corruption Perception Index continues to fall. When the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, speaking about the Trinidad and Tobago economy tells the country in June 2020, in the run-up to the general elections, and I quote, Madam Speaker, simply put, this government and my team at the Ministry of Finance, thanks to this government and my team at the Ministry of Finance, we, meaning the country, are in a good place. But just 2 months afterwards, he goes to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund to withdraw. And this is what he had to say in the report that was submitted by the Honourable Minister in this very House. And I quote, Madam Speaker, the government faced a severe cash constraint, which put it at a major risk, and as a result, there was an urgent need for cash. There was an urgent need for a cash injection to the consolidated fund, and pay close attention, Madam Speaker, to avert the potential for reputational risk arising from the non-payment on account of insufficient fund. How can anyone have confidence in this minister, Madam Speaker? He knew that the economy was in crisis. He knew that the country was in bankrupt since before the general election. But in order to create a narrative, he was saying, in other words, under his hand, Madam Speaker, this country has become bankrupt. When the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, when the Minister of Finance accepts and recognizes that the National Insurance Board fund is in crisis and still takes money out of that fund, to put it into the National Infrastructure Fund, further creating and worsening the crisis, Madam Speaker, in the National Insurance Fund, how can anyone have confidence in the minister's action? When the Minister of Finance illegally tried to enforce the property tax in Trinidad and Tobago,
draw the word illegally. Okay? Please.
Duly noted, Madam Speaker, duly withdrawn. When the Minister of Finance attempted to introduce and implement the property tax, it took a UNC opposition, it took the opposition to take it to court to prove that the minister's actions were illegal. When there's $10.5 billion in excess liquidity, Madam Speaker, in the vaults of commercial banks, this highlights what we already know. There's liquidity. Nobody's borrowing, nobody's investing. And the reason for that, Madam Speaker, is nobody has confidence in the Minister of Finance at all. Madam Speaker, the ease of doing business. We have moved from 79 under our tenure, under the leadership of the member for Siparia, to 105th under this minister. And that's not all. We are now ranked 174th out of 190 countries for enforcing contracts, 158 for paying taxes, 160th for paying taxes, 158 for registering property. Is it any surprise, Madam Speaker, that things are so bad? Why business has no confidence, business persons have no confidence in this country, Madam Speaker? Baso Mai, who is from my constituency, from St. Lutrice, she has no idea, Madam Speaker, of what any of these indicators are. But she knows that she is in grave difficulty. She knows that the country is in crisis, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we know that the Member of Parliament will come here, the Honourable Member of Parliament, Diego Martin Notice, will come here to blame Kamala again. But all he has to tell us today is having spent $300 billion of our dollars, Madam Speaker.
The time is now spent.
Hallelujah.
Member, you have to beg to move. You beg to move?
I beg to move, Madam Speaker.
Yes. Member for Miaro?
I second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Honourable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this House express its loss of confidence in the Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance.